The Orion spear knifed through the obsidian void, little more than a ghostly silhouette against the stars. To the untrained eye, it would have seemed like just another piece of cosmic debris drifting aimlessly between worlds. But the spear was far more than that, a precision instrument forged for a singular purpose, bearing the deadliest cargo in the galaxy. Captain Jace Reiner and his 5-man Omega Squad. On board the stealthy vessel, Jace stood on the command deck, studying a holographic projection of their target, the Krall-occupied moon of Zikari Prime. The insectoid aliens had seized the tiny world early in their campaign of conquest, transforming it into an industrial powerhouse bristling with shipyards, factories, and fortifications. And now, according to Allied intelligence, the Krall were building something new in those yards, something that could swing the tide of the war firmly in their favor. Jace's jaw tightened as he manipulated the holo display, zooming in on the primary shipyard complex. Towering assembly gantries and sprawling fabrication grids stretched for kilometers, swarming with the activity of Krall workers, engineers, and soldiers. At the heart of the yard, a monstrous skeletal structure was taking shape, clad in the distinctive black and purple hull plates of a Krall dreadnought. But this was no ordinary warship. It was easily twice the size of anything the aliens had fielded before, a titan built to smash through humanity's defenses and bombard their worlds into submission. "Quite the beast they've got cooking down there," a voice drawled from behind Jace. He turned to see Sergeant Maddox leaning against the bulkhead, arms folded across his broad chest. The demolitions expert had a reckless glint in his eye that Jace knew all too well. "Bet it'll make a mighty big bang when we feed it a belly full of antimatter." Jace narrowed his eyes at the sergeant. "Stay focused. This isn't just another bug hunt. If that dreadnought reaches operational status, it could change everything. We can't afford any mistakes." "Don't worry," Cap Maddox said with a wicked grin. "When have we ever let you down?" Jace opened his mouth to retort, but the words died on his lips as the rest of Omega Squad strode onto the deck, lean, hard-edged men, each one forged into a weapon every bit as lethal as the guns they carried. There was Corporal Ramirez, the squad's long-ranged specialist, his custom sniper rifle slung across his back. Beside him walked Specialist Flynn, the tech wizard who could hack any system and conjure miracles out of a scavenged circuit board. Bringing up the rear was Sergeant Hawkins, Omega's close-quarters expert and an artist with a nano-edged combat knife. They gathered around the holo table, the display lighting their faces in ghostly blue as Jace laid out the plan. "Our primary objective is the dreadnought. We need to plant the charges and send that monstrosity back to the scrap heap before it ever sees combat. But we've also identified 2 secondary targets of opportunity." He highlighted a dome-shaped structure on the holo. "First, the command and control center. If we can take that out, it'll cripple their coordination and buy the fleet precious time to react." Jace shifted the display to a massive, heavily armored cube squatting at the edge of the yards. "And this is the foundry complex. From what we can tell, it's the only facility on Zikari Prime capable of producing the ultra-dense hull alloys the Krall use on their capships. If we can put it out of commission, it'll deal a major blow to their production capabilities across the entire sector." Ramirez spoke up, his voice a cool monotone. "I assume the Krall have some serious defenses in place around targets that valuable." "You assume right," Jace said. "The yard is protected by a network of surface-to-orbit plasma batteries that'll vaporize anything that tries to drop in from above. We'll be inserting outside their coverage," here he indicated a ravine 2 clicks from the perimeter, "and infiltrating on foot. Stealth is the watchword, at least until the crap hits the turbine. Questions?" "Just one," Hawkins said, cracking his knuckles with a grin. "When do we drop?" 30 minutes later, Omega Squad stood poised at the Orion Spear's drop bay, sealed into their tactical hard suits and thrumming with pre-mission adrenaline. Jace cinched his weapon harness and gave his men a final nod. "You know the drill, Omega. Fast, silent, and surgical. Let's go to work." As one, they leapt into the hungry star-speckled maw of space and plummeted towards Zikari Prime, little more than a clutch of blurred shadows against the infinite night. Invisible to the naked eye, their chameleon hard suits drinking in the faint ambient light, they angled towards the deep, jagged crevice Jace had selected as their LZ. Retro thrusters flared at the last moment, silent as an owl's wing beat, and then they were down, crouched amid broken boulders and deep blue shadows. Omega moved out immediately, gliding up the steep, fractured walls of the ravine with gecko-like grace. They crested the rim and slunk towards the perimeter of the sprawling Krall shipyard, little more than ghosts in the starlight. Towering walls studded with aurora pulsing sensor nodes and criss-crossing searchlight beams loomed before them, but the humans' hard suits drank in the radiating energies, rendering them little more than shimmers in the half-light. Maddox took point, leading them along a circuitous route that threaded between the sensor grid with millimetric precision. A stealth micro-drone darted ahead, feeding Jace a steady stream of tactical data on his heads-up display. He watched the Krall patrols sweeping the inner perimeter, insectoid soldiers marching in perfect unison, plasma rifles held at port arms. A few tense moments passed as one fire team crunched by within mere meters of their position, but the aliens' compound eyes slid right over them without a flicker. And then they were past the outer defenses and infiltrating the shipyard proper, stealing through the forest of skeletal gantries, scaffold towers and assembly nests. Krall swarmed everywhere in their tens of thousands, scuttling along the superstructure of the unfinished dreadnought like ants over a carcass. But for all their numbers, they remained oblivious to the 6 heavily armed humans moving through their midst like lethal shadows. Ramirez peeled off to find an elevated sniper perch overlooking the primary generator complex, while Jace led the rest of the squad in a flanking maneuver towards the half-built dreadnought at the heart of the yard. As they closed in, the scale of the monstrous vessel became mind-bendingly apparent. It loomed above them like an obsidian cliff, its serrated contours blotting out the stars. The thrum of industrial activity was near deafening. "Christ, she's huge," Hawkins muttered over the comm. "How the hell are we supposed to take down something that big?" "One bite at a time," Hawk Maddox replied. "Let me show you how it's done." The sergeant opened a compartment on his armor and produced a fist-sized lump of dull gray metal. "Say hello to my little friend. Experimental antimatter demo charge. Just one of these babies has enough boom to slag a cruiser." "How many did you bring?" Jace asked. Maddox patted his ammo pouches with a wild grin. "I like to be thorough." "All right, let's get to it. Flynn, find us a way inside that thing." The tech specialist unfurled a micro-drone and sent it flitting across the dreadnought's hull, scanning and mapping. "Got it, boss. There's a primary access tunnel 60 meters up in portside. Doesn't look heavily guarded." "They're not expecting anyone to get this close," Jace said. "But stay frosty if they realize what we're up to. They'll throw everything they have at us." They launched grapples and zipped up to the tunnel mouth. The Krall had sealed it with an energy barrier, but Flynn conjured a digital key and sliced it open like silk. They slipped inside, into a labyrinthine warren of dimly lit corridors and cavernous assembly chambers filled with dormant machinery. The thrum of power generators reverberated through the deck. "All right, look alive and stay quiet," Jace murmured. "We need to reach the central power core and—" A piercing hooting alarm erupted throughout the ship, so loud it made their hardsuit audio dampers clamp down. "Alert, alert," a rasping Krall voice screeched. "Human infiltrators detected in Sector 714. All units engage and destroy." "Damn," Jace spat. "They made us." "Omega, we are going loud. Weapons free. Move for the objective." Shouts and thudding footfalls echoed through the corridor as a Krall fire team came charging around the bend, plasma rifles glowing hot. Hawkins was on them in a blur, his electrified blade flashing silver blue as it sliced through chitin plate and pale flesh. Rifle muzzles flared as Jace and Flynn joined him, stitching the Krall with armor-piercing hypersonic flechettes. Gore-splattered bodies crashed to the deck. But there were more Krall surging in from all directions, an endless tide of fanged, segmented death. Plasma bolts sizzled and spat, searing the bulkheads. "Maddox, clear us a path," Jace bellowed. The demo expert grinned savagely and primed a fistful of charges. With pleasure he hurled them into the massed Krall, and a beat later the world turned white. A rolling wave of force tore through the corridor, hurling mangled bodies in all directions. "Move," Jace roared, and they were running through the fire and debris, storming deeper into the heart of the enemy vessel. Krall resistance intensified with every meter, a deluge of plasma and razor-sharp claws. Maddox's charges blasted smoldering holes in their lines, while Flynn's drones spat darting laser beams. But for every alien that fell, a dozen more charged shrieking into the fray. They fought like men possessed, with speed and skill and ferocity the Krall had never before encountered. Plasma seared and blades flashed silver, and flechettes stitched ghastly patterns in jade-green flesh. But even Omega Squad was only human, and their hard suits could only absorb so much punishment before failing. Jace's HUD flashed angry warnings as his armor integrity dropped under the onslaught. A plasma bolt clipped his shoulder, breaching the hydrostatic gel layer and scorching meat. He gritted his teeth and put a burst through the offending shooter's compound eyes. "Citrep," he barked over the comm. "We're down to 40% combat effectiveness," Flynn reported breathlessly. "Hawkins is hit but mobile, closing on target chamber." "Ramirez, where the hell is our backup?" Jace demanded. The sniper's calm voice filtered back. "Skies are clear, Captain. Drones show the generator complex is still intact. No movement from the CC center either." Jace's gut clenched. They were on their own and the Krall knew it. The aliens were throwing everything they had at the humans, determined to drown them in a tide of bodies. "All right, Omega, new plan. We blow this ship to hell and punch out hard. Extraction via spear, danger close." "About damn time," Maddox crowed. He primed his last 3 antimatter charges and chucked them down the corridor. Fire in the hole. The world erupted in light and fury. A sphere of nuclear hellfire consumed the heart of the dreadnought, blasting outwards, melting bulkheads and vaporizing Krall by the thousand. The monstrous ship convulsed like a dying thing, belching flame and shattered metal. Tremors ripped through it as secondary explosions chained through its power systems. Through the fire and ruin, 4 scorched and bloody human survivors came limping, Flynn hauling a wounded Hawkins, Maddox blasting a path with his rifle. They reached a breached landing bay and Jace slapped his gauntlet, sending an extraction beacon screaming into the void. Instants later, the Orion's spear came screaming from the heavens, ramp gaping open, point defense cannons flaring. It settled just long enough for Omega to scramble aboard before boosting for orbit. The ramp was still closing as a blossom of murderous light flared behind them, the Krall dreadnought finally succumbing to the forces tearing it apart from within. A terrible, world-shattering blast that lit the night like a second sun. In the spear's blood-slicked drop bay, Omega collapsed, chests heaving, pushing back helmets to gulp stale, recycled air. They were alive. They had done the impossible. Krall's shipyard neutralized. Jace rasped into the comm, wincing as Hawkins sprayed sealant foam on his injuries. "Let's see what those bugs think about that." "Hoo-ah," rumbled a wounded but defiant Maddox. "Bet we really kicked em in the thorax." Jace allowed himself a tight, wordless smile. Maddox wasn't wrong, but the war was far from over. Omega Squad were the best at what they did, born for the blade and the bullet, and the Krall had only begun to feel their sting. He met the eyes of his battered men, one by one, and saw the same steely determination shining back. "We hurt them today," Jace said, "but it's only the beginning. Before this is over, we're going to drive the Krall all the way back to whatever hell they spawned from. We won't stop until every last one of them is dead or driven from human space." His smile turned hard and cold as the void. "We're Omega Squad, and the galaxy is about to find out exactly what that means."